At just 14 years old, pregnant and terrified, Emma watched as her own mother slammed the door in her face and cast her out without mercy. With nowhere to go, she wandered the streets facing hunger, cold, and the cruel stares of strangers. Every step was a fight for survival, every night a relentless nightmare. Alone and vulnerable, she had no idea who to trust or where to find help. Watch this emotional story until the end, and be moved by a journey of resilience, injustice, and triumph that will touch your heart. It was a cold and rainy afternoon in Portland, Oregon, when Emma, a 14-year-old girl, was forced out of her home by her own mother, Olivia. She stood frozen on the porch, clutching a small, tattered suitcase, as her mother's harsh words cut through the air like shards of glass. "I warned you, Emma. I will not have this in my house. You've brought nothing but shame to this family. Get out." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she searched Olivia's eyes for any sign of hesitation or remorse, but there was none. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening finality, leaving her drenched in a mixture of rain and heartbreak. With nowhere to go, Emma wandered the unfamiliar streets, her hands trembling from the cold and the weight of her new reality. She thought back to the moment she discovered she was pregnant. A mixture of fear and faint hope had washed over her. Then, for a fleeting second, she believed her mother might stand by her, despite the mistake that Olivia so bitterly condemned. But Emma had underestimated the depth of her mother's disdain. The first few nights were a living nightmare. With no shelter, Emma slept on a bench in a park, gripping her suitcase tightly, as though it could protect her from the bitter wind or the harsh indifference of the world around her. Strangers passed by without a second glance, their hurried footsteps a cruel reminder of her invisibility. Each hour felt heavier than the last, and Emma began to wonder if she had the strength to keep going. But deep within her, a spark refused to die. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the tiny life growing inside her. That spark kept her walking, one trembling step at a time, through the unforgiving streets of Portland. Her life changed one fateful afternoon as she sat outside a closed bakery, desperately trying to escape the rain. Grace, an elderly woman with a weathered face and kind eyes, approached her. She carried a tray of pastries in one hand and an umbrella in the other. "You look like you could use something warm," Grace said, her voice gentle but firm as she handed Emma a steaming cup of coffee and a fresh croissant. Emma hesitated, unsure whether to accept the stranger's kindness. "It's all right, dear. I won't bite." Grace chuckled softly, her smile disarming Emma's guarded heart. That small act of compassion became the first ray of hope Emma had felt in weeks. Grace didn't just offer food, she offered a lifeline. She invited Emma inside her tiny, bustling bakery, a place filled with the comforting aroma of bread and cinnamon. The warmth of the room wrapped around Emma like a blanket, momentarily shielding her from the harshness of the world outside. Grace listened patiently as Emma recounted her story through tears, her voice breaking as she described her mother's rejection and the fear of raising a child on her own. Grace's eyes softened, and without hesitation, she made a decision that would forever change both their lives. "You'll stay here with me," Grace said. "I don't have much, but I know a thing or two about second chances. You deserve one." The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act for Emma. Grace provided her with a small room above the bakery, and in exchange, Emma helped with cleaning and light tasks in the shop. At first, the neighborhood wasn't kind to her. Customers whispered behind her back, judging the irresponsible teenage girl who had been taken in by Grace. Some even stopped frequenting the bakery altogether, calling Grace foolish for involving herself. But Grace was unyielding. "People will talk no matter what you do," she told Emma one day as they kneaded dough side by side. "You can't let them define who you are." Emma held on to those words like a lifeline, slowly regaining pieces of her shattered self-esteem. She worked hard, pouring her energy into learning everything about baking. Grace taught her how to knead dough, glaze pastries, and find joy in the simple rhythm of the work. It was a far cry from the life Emma had known before, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. The turning point came when Emma went into labor late one night. Grace stayed by her side through every painful contraction, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. When Ava's cries filled the small apartment above the bakery, Emma's heart swelled with a mixture of love and fear. She stared at her newborn daughter, her tiny fingers grasping Emma's own, and vowed to protect her at all costs. The months that followed were grueling. Emma juggled sleepless nights caring for Ava with long days at the bakery. Many customers continued to judge her, their disapproval evident in the way they refused to meet her eyes. But Emma also began to notice something else. A growing number of people who supported her. A kind word here, a warm smile there. Slowly, the bakery became more than just a place to work. It became a sanctuary for Emma and Ava. As the seasons changed, Emma started to find her rhythm. She discovered strength she never knew she had, fueled by her love for Ava and the unwavering support of Grace. What she didn't know, however, was that the wounds of her past were far from healed, and they would soon be reopened in ways she never expected. Emma's new life above Grace's bakery was anything but easy. Adjusting to a routine of early mornings, long hours, and the cries of a newborn was a monumental task. Despite her youth, she was determined to make it work. Ava, her tiny daughter, became the anchor that kept her grounded. Every time Emma held her child, she felt a surge of love so powerful it erased the pain of rejection and the harsh whispers from customers who judged her. Grace was Emma's steadfast guide. Every morning, she would knock softly on Emma's door, a fresh cup of tea in hand, and gently encourage her to face the day. "It's not the critics who matter," Grace would say. "It's what you build from the rubble that counts." Emma quickly learned that life in the bakery wasn't just about baking bread or making pastries. It was about the people, each one carrying their own stories of hardship, triumph, and loss. But some of them were less than welcoming. One afternoon, as Emma stood behind the counter, a middle-aged woman approached her. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her gaze cold as she placed an order. "2 loaves of sourdough," the woman said curtly. Then, after a pause, she added, "I hope Grace knows what she's doing, taking in someone like you. People are talking, you know." The words stung, but Emma kept her composure. She handed over the bread with trembling hands, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Thank you for your purchase. Have a good day." Grace saw the exchange from the kitchen and pulled Emma aside after the customer left. "You can't let people like her get to you," she said firmly. "Some folks are just looking for someone to blame for their own unhappiness. Don't give them the satisfaction." Despite Grace's encouragement, the judgment from others weighed heavily on Emma. It was only Ava's innocent laughter and Grace's unwavering belief in her that kept her moving forward. One evening, Grace invited Emma to sit with her in the bakery after closing. They shared a simple dinner of soup and bread, the room filled with the comforting hum of the old heater. As the conversation turned personal, Grace began to share her own story. "You know, I wasn't always this strong," Grace admitted, her voice tinged with melancholy. "I lost my husband when I was young. He died in an accident, and I was left to raise my son alone." Emma listened intently, her heart aching for the older woman. Grace's resilience was something Emma had always admired, and now she understood the pain behind it. "I've made my share of mistakes," Grace continued, "but I learned something along the way. Life doesn't give us do-overs. We have to make the most of what we're given. And you, Emma, have been given a second chance. Don't waste it." That conversation became a turning point for Emma. She realized that Grace wasn't just helping her out of charity, she genuinely believed in her potential. For the first time in years, Emma began to believe in herself. Months turned into years, and under Grace's mentorship, Emma became an exceptional baker. She poured her energy into learning everything about the craft, from perfecting dough consistency to mastering intricate designs for cakes and pastries. Her confidence grew with each small success, and the bakery began to thrive, thanks in part to her fresh ideas and determination. When Ava turned 3, Grace surprised Emma with an unexpected proposal. "This bakery has been my life's work," Grace said, "but I'm not getting any younger. I want you to take it over one day." Emma was stunned. "I couldn't, Grace. I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you." "That's exactly why I'm offering it to you," Grace replied with a knowing smile. "You've got the heart and the drive to make something of yourself, Emma, and I trust you with this place." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she hugged the older woman. "I won't let you down," she promised. True to her word, Emma worked tirelessly to modernize the bakery while honoring Grace's legacy. She renamed it Ava's Cafe, a tribute to the daughter who had inspired her to fight for a better future. The cafe became a community hub, known for its warm atmosphere and delicious treats. People who once whispered about Emma now praised her resilience and talent. Even those who had judged her harshly began to visit the cafe regularly, drawn in by her kindness and determination. But while life seemed to be settling into a peaceful rhythm, Emma's past had not forgotten her. One day, as Emma was closing up the cafe, she noticed a woman lingering outside. Her heart sank as she recognized the figure. It was Olivia, her mother. Emma froze, a mix of anger and fear washing over her. She hadn't seen Olivia in over a decade, and the sight of her brought back painful memories she had worked so hard to bury. "Emma," Olivia called softly, her voice almost unrecognizable. "I need to talk to you." Emma's first instinct was to turn her back and walk away, but something in her mother's tone stopped her. She stepped outside, crossing her arms defensively. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, her voice cold. "You made it clear I wasn't welcome in your life." Olivia hesitated, her eyes filled with regret. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began, "but I've made so many mistakes. I want to make things right if you'll let me." Emma's chest tightened. Part of her wanted to lash out, to tell Olivia exactly how much pain she had caused, but another part of her, a quieter, more vulnerable part, longed for the mother she had once loved. "I don't think I can do this," Emma said finally, her voice trembling. "Not now." Olivia nodded, her shoulders sagging with defeat. "I understand," she said quietly, "but if you ever change your mind, I'll be here." As Olivia walked away, Emma felt a wave of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Enjoying the story? Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to follow the next part of this emotional journey. Emma stood frozen outside Ava's cafe long after Olivia disappeared into the night. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She had spent years rebuilding her life, burying the pain of her mother's rejection under layers of hard work and love for her daughter. Yet, in an instant, Olivia's reappearance had unearthed emotions Emma thought she had long since silenced: anger, hurt, and an ache for closure she wasn't sure she'd ever find. The next morning, Grace noticed Emma's distracted demeanor as they prepared the cafe for the day. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Grace remarked, kneading dough with practiced ease. Emma hesitated before responding. "My mom, she showed up last night." Grace's hands paused mid-motion, her eyes narrowing with concern. "What did she say?" "She wants to talk. She said she wants to make things right." Emma's voice wavered, betraying her uncertainty. "I don't know if I can handle this, Grace, after everything she did." Grace wiped her hands on her apron and placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "Listen, sweetheart. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about freeing yourself from the hold their actions have on you. That doesn't mean you have to let her back into your life, but you should decide what's best for you and Ava, not for her." Emma nodded, but the weight of the decision lingered over the next few days. Olivia's presence seemed to haunt her. Emma caught herself glancing at the door every time a new customer entered, half expecting to see her mother's face again. Ava, now a curious 13-year-old, noticed her mother's unease. "Mom, is something wrong?" Ava asked one evening as they sat together on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn. Emma hesitated. She had always been honest with her daughter, but this was a part of her past she had shielded Ava from. Taking a deep breath, she decided it was time to tell her the truth. "There's something I need to tell you, sweetie," Emma began, her voice steady but soft. "Your grandmother, my mom, came to the cafe a few days ago." Ava's eyes widened in surprise. "I have a grandmother? I thought you didn't have any family." "I do, but it's complicated," Emma admitted. "When I got pregnant with you, she didn't handle it well. She asked me to leave, and I've been on my own ever since, until I met Grace." Ava listened intently, her young mind processing the revelation. "Why did she come back now?" she asked. "She said she wants to make things right," Emma replied, her tone uncertain. "But I don't know if I can trust her. I don't even know if I want to." Ava's expression was thoughtful as she asked, "Do you want me to meet her?" The question caught Emma off guard. She hadn't considered how this decision might affect Ava. For her daughter's sake, Emma realized she couldn't ignore Olivia forever. Emma finally agreed to meet Olivia again, this time bringing Ava along. They arranged to meet in a quiet park not far from the cafe. Emma's heart pounded as she watched Olivia approach, her once stern face now softened by time and remorse. "Thank you for coming," Olivia said, her voice trembling. She turned her attention to Ava and smiled hesitantly. "You must be Ava. You look just like your mother when she was your age." Ava smiled politely but stayed close to Emma, her wariness evident. Olivia sat on the bench across from them, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I know I don't deserve this," Olivia began, looking directly at Emma. "But I've spent years regretting the choices I made. I was so consumed by fear of what people would think that I forgot what really mattered. Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." Emma listened silently, her emotions a storm beneath the surface. She wanted to believe her mother's words, but the scars Olivia had left ran deep. "Why now?" Emma finally asked, her voice sharp. "Why come back after all this time?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "I'm not well, Emma," she admitted. "The doctors found cancer. It's advanced, and I don't know how much time I have left. I didn't want to leave this world without at least trying to make things right with you." The revelation hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She struggled to process the news, torn between sympathy and the pain of her mother's past betrayal. Ava reached for Emma's hand, offering silent support. "I need time," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia nodded, her tears spilling over. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you're ready." The days that followed were filled with turmoil. Emma threw herself into work at the cafe, using the rhythm of baking to quiet her thoughts. But no matter how hard she tried, Olivia's words echoed in her mind. Grace, ever the voice of reason, reminded Emma that the choice was hers alone. One evening, as Emma closed up the cafe, Ava approached her with a determined look. "Mom, I think you should talk to her again," Ava said. Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know, Ava. It's so complicated." "I know," Ava replied, "but I've seen how strong you are. If anyone can handle this, it's you." Emma smiled at her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. Ava had a way of cutting through the noise and reminding Emma of what truly mattered. Emma eventually agreed to meet Olivia again, this time alone. They sat in the cafe after hours, the quiet atmosphere amplifying the tension between them. Olivia spoke candidly about her illness, her regrets, and her hope for a second chance. Emma listened, her defenses slowly softening as she saw the vulnerability in her mother's eyes. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you," Emma admitted, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to try for Ava's sake, and maybe for mine too." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she reached for Emma's hand. "That's more than I could have ever hoped for," she said. The tentative step toward forgiveness didn't erase years of pain, but it marked the beginning of something Emma never thought possible, a fragile reconnection with her mother. Olivia began visiting Ava's cafe regularly, timing her visits when the shop was quiet. At first, their conversations were stiff, laced with hesitation and unspoken words, but slowly, piece by piece, they began to fill the gaping silence between them. Ava, with her boundless curiosity and open heart, became the unexpected bridge between Emma and Olivia. She would eagerly ask Olivia questions about Emma's childhood, her tone light and filled with wonder. Olivia's face would soften as she recounted stories of a young Emma, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Your mom used to love climbing trees," Olivia shared one afternoon. "She'd get so high I thought she'd never come down, always fearless, even as a little girl." Emma, listening from behind the counter, felt a pang of bittersweet emotion. The memories Olivia shared felt like fragments of a life she had almost forgotten, a time before everything fell apart. But not all moments were easy. One evening after closing the cafe, Olivia brought up the day she had expelled Emma from their home. "I was wrong," Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was protecting myself, my reputation. But all I did was destroy the one thing that truly mattered. I've lived with that guilt every day since." Emma's chest tightened. The memory of that day was a wound that had never fully healed. She wanted to shout, to demand why her mother hadn't realized this sooner, but instead, she asked the question that had haunted her for years. "Why didn't you come for me sooner, Mom?" Olivia looked down, tears spilling onto her hands. "I was ashamed. Every time I thought about reaching out, I convinced myself you'd hate me and I wouldn't have blamed you if you did." Emma let the silence stretch between them, the weight of Olivia's words sinking in. Finally, she sighed, her voice trembling. "You're right. I did hate you for a long time. But Grace taught me something I never thought I'd understand. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself." As Olivia's presence in Emma's life became more visible, whispers began to circulate among the cafe's regulars. Some customers, the same ones who had once judged Emma for her teenage pregnancy, now passed judgment on her decision to reconnect with Olivia. "She's too forgiving," one woman muttered to a friend while paying for her coffee. "After everything her mother did, I'd never let someone like that back into my life." Emma overheard the comment, but chose to stay silent. She had learned long ago that she couldn't control what people thought of her. Instead, she focused on what truly mattered: her daughter, her cafe, and the small steps she was taking toward healing. One afternoon, a longtime customer named Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher, approached Emma as she cleaned the counter. "People are always quick to judge what they don't understand," he said kindly. "But what you're doing, letting someone back in after they've hurt you, takes strength most of us don't have. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Emma smiled gratefully, his words reminding her that not all judgments were harsh. Just as Emma began to feel a sense of peace, life dealt another blow. Olivia's health began to decline rapidly, her once energetic visits to the cafe becoming fewer and far between. Emma and Ava visited Olivia at her modest apartment, bringing her homemade soups and pastries. Each visit was bittersweet, filled with laughter, stories, and the looming shadow of Olivia's illness. One day, as Emma helped Olivia into bed, her mother grabbed her hand and held it tightly. "I don't want to leave this world without knowing you've forgiven me," Olivia said, her voice frail but earnest. Emma's throat tightened. "I forgive you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm still angry sometimes, and I may never forget what happened. But I forgive you, Mom." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she squeezed Emma's hand weakly. That's all I needed to hear. Olivia passed away peacefully in her sleep a few weeks later, leaving behind a legacy of regret, but also redemption. At her small funeral, Emma stood by Ava and Grace, surrounded by a few of Olivia's old friends and neighbors, as she delivered a eulogy. Emma's voice was strong and steady. "My mother and I had a complicated relationship," she began. "There were times I thought I'd never see her again, let alone forgive her. But in the end, she taught me one of the greatest lessons of my life. It's never too late to try to make things right." The words resonated deeply with those in attendance, many of whom had their own unresolved conflicts. After Olivia's passing, Emma felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The loss was heavy, but it also brought closure to a chapter of her life that had long been defined by pain. She poured her energy into Ava's cafe, expanding the menu and hosting community events in honor of Grace, who had been the first to teach her about second chances. Ava, inspired by her mother's resilience, began helping out in the cafe after school. Together, they created a warm, welcoming space where people from all walks of life could gather. One evening, as the cafe buzzed with the chatter of happy customers, Emma stood behind the counter watching Ava expertly serve a table of regulars. Grace approached her with a knowing smile. "You've built something beautiful here," Grace said. "And it's just the beginning." Emma smiled, her heart full. "It's not just mine," she replied. "It's ours, yours, Ava's, and even hers." As the sun set over Portland, the cafe glowed with the light of second chances and the quiet strength of a woman who had faced every storm and come out stronger on the other side. Months had passed since Olivia's funeral, but her presence lingered in subtle ways. Emma often caught herself thinking of the quiet moments they had shared in Olivia's final days, the stories she had told, and the regrets she had finally voiced. For years, Emma had carried the burden of her mother's rejection like a weight on her chest, but now, for the first time, she felt a lightness she couldn't fully explain. Forgiving Olivia hadn't erased the pain, but it had freed her from the chains of anger and resentment that had bound her for so long. Life at Ava's cafe continued to blossom. The small shop had become a haven not just for Emma and Ava, but for the entire neighborhood. Regulars gathered daily, drawn by the warm atmosphere, the smell of freshly baked pastries, and the undeniable sense of community Emma had worked so hard to create. Grace, who was still a guiding presence in Emma's life, noticed the change in her protégé. "You seem lighter these days," Grace observed one morning as they prepared a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls. "Like you've finally let go of something heavy." Emma smiled, her hands deftly rolling the dough. "I think I have," she admitted. "For years I told myself I didn't need my mom. I thought moving on meant forgetting her, but forgiving her gave me something I didn't even realize I was missing. Peace." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "Peace doesn't come easy, but it's worth fighting for." Ava had grown into a confident and compassionate young girl, her mother's resilience reflected in her every move. She spent her afternoons at the cafe after school, helping with everything from serving customers to perfecting the chocolate chip cookie recipe that had become her signature creation. One Saturday, as the cafe buzzed with the chatter of families and friends, Ava approached Emma with an idea. "Mom, what if we added a memory wall to the cafe?" Ava suggested. "People could pin up pictures or notes about someone they've lost or someone who's inspired them." Emma's heart swelled with pride. "That's a beautiful idea, Ava. Let's do it." Together, they cleared a space on one of the cafe's walls and installed a corkboard surrounded by fairy lights. They called it the Wall of Remembrance, and within days, it was covered with photos, letters, and mementos. Emma pinned a picture of Olivia to the wall, along with a simple note. "Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to love." The wall became a centerpiece of Ava's cafe, a testament to the power of memory and connection. It wasn't just a place for coffee and pastries anymore. It was a sanctuary for healing and hope. One crisp autumn morning, as Emma was setting out the day's fresh-baked goods, the cafe bell jingled, signaling the arrival of a new customer. She looked up to see a woman in her late 40s standing hesitantly by the door. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice tentative. "I was told this place has a wall for remembering loved ones." Emma smiled warmly. "That's right. "It's over here," she said, leading the woman to the wall of remembrance. The woman stared at the photos and notes, her fingers brushing lightly over a pinned letter. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "This is beautiful. My daughter passed away last year. I've been looking for a way to honor her memory." Emma's chest tightened with empathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said softly. "If you'd like, you're welcome to add something to the wall." The woman nodded, pulling a small photo of a young girl from her purse. As she pinned it to the wall, Emma felt a wave of gratitude for the life she had built. The cafe had become so much more than she ever dreamed, a place where people could find solace in their darkest moments, just as she once had. One evening, Grace invited Emma and Ava over for dinner. The older woman's apartment was cozy, filled with the smell of her famous pot roast and the sound of jazz music playing softly in the background. As they sat around the table, Grace held up her glass of wine and smiled. "To second chances," she said, "and to the two of you who've shown me what it means to live with courage." Emma raised her glass, her heart full of gratitude. "To you, Grace, for being the mother I needed when I didn't have one," she replied. Grace's eyes glistened with tears. "And to Ava's cafe," she added. "It's time for me to step back and let you take the reins completely, Emma. You've built something beautiful, and it's yours now." Emma felt a pang of sadness, but also pride. Grace's retirement marked the end of an era, but it also symbolized how far Emma had come. Years later, Emma stood in the doorway of Ava's cafe, watching as her now teenage daughter helped a group of customers with their orders. The cafe was thriving, its walls adorned with memories, and its tables filled with laughter and conversation. Grace had moved to a quiet town by the coast, but still visited occasionally, her pride in Emma evident every time she walked through the doors. Olivia's memory lived on through the lessons Emma had learned, and the love she poured into her work and her family. One evening, as the sun set over Portland, Emma wrote a letter to herself, a reflection on the journey she had taken. "Dear Emma," she wrote, "you faced every storm with courage. You've built a life filled with love, hope, and strength. Never forget how far you've come, and always believe in the power of second chances." If this story touched your heart, click the thanks button, leave your like, and subscribe to our channel. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you.